Man, he's early. Yeah, I'll go back and get some. All right. I'm gonna take the 15, and I'm gonna take the paper because I know he hadn't read it, but he wants to call him bitch at me anyways. Yeah, he had to call me when the Reverend was in the studios. I almost said to him, dude, there's only one Reverend, and that's me. Um, You know, I mean, who calls somebody during the middle of a break to complain about that?
We got 1 minute till the ad starts.
All right. And well, yeah, never mind. Hey, Jody, do you break them up after you record the show? Then you break them up in two segments? That's why. Okay, just trying to make it easier for you. All right, it is the Ed Gein Radio Show, your Ferguson-free radio network, where we don't want to talk about anything that's going on in Ferguson, Missouri, what's happening. Instead, we focus on what's happening here in the state of Florida. We have the #1 talk show in the state, syndicated all throughout the state, and many great stations that pick up the show all the way from Jacksonville down to Miami and Tampa and Orlando and Gainesville and everywhere else. So thank you so much for tuning in as we broadcast through the Florida Radio Network. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com. eddeanradio@gmail.com is the email address, and the website. It's not sexy, just so you can catch the show and certain things of it. Just go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Hour #1, two of my favorite guests from the Sunshine State News, senior political writer Kevin Derby, and one of my other favorite guests, well-known political commentator. You see him on Fox News, Ed Lynch. Coming up Tuesday, Kevin Derby, let me start with you. Coming up in just a few days on Tuesday is the primary, all throughout the state, for the Republican and Democratic side. We'll get to the Democrats in a second. Anything sexy on the Republican side that voters need to be worried about or taking a look at what may happen in November? What are we seeing, before I go to Ed Lynch here, what are we seeing, for example, in South Florida? I mean, What are the issues among the Republicans? Is it about the environment? Is it about Obamacare? Is it about, well, this guy's a moderate, this guy's a rhino, this guy's a political crossdresser? In some of these congressional districts on the Republican side, what have the debates been between the Republicans? Let me go to Ed Lynch, my good friend down in South Florida. Ed, we'll get to the Democrats in a second. I must tell you, Ed, when I look at some of the Republican primaries this year, I mean, you've got seats like Alan Dick Grayson in Central Florida. You got Patrick Murphy, who's positioned himself as a moderate. Joe Garcia down in South Florida. I mean, have we been running lackluster? Not say we, they. Have the Republicans been running lackluster Republicans than normally what we've seen in the past years? Wow. Um, Ed, let me start with you. Let's go on the Democratic side. What would happen? Again, the primary is only a few days away. Rick Scott doesn't have really a race. The only races, as Kevin just pointed out, is some of these congressional races throughout the state. But follow me for a second. There is one race that among political elites, I shouldn't say elites, but political insiders like us. I don't call myself an elite, but political insiders like us and people that are following this. There is a race out there that's been in the radar, but for some under the radar. But on the Democratic side, Nana Rich, who should have gained traction, she is not. She's running against the newly Democratic individual by the name of Governor or former Governor Charlie Crist, Mr. Political Crossdresser out there, who's only been a Democrat for 20 plus months. Nana Rich can't gain any traction. What are we going to look at? What should we look at Tuesday's votes? If the race is done by 20 points, who cares? I say, Ed Lynch, that if Nana Rich loses by 10 points, that's a victory for her. Bad news for Charlie. All right, Kevin Derby, you recall back in 2008, remember some of the Hillary Clinton crowd, the ladies, extremely still very Democratic, very liberal, had come out on Fox News and other avenues out there in media venues and said, we're not voting for Barack Obama. I understand this is 6 years old, but they said, he was a sexist to Hillary Clinton. He made up lies about Bill, about him being a racist, and we don't like the way he treated Hillary. We don't like the way that he's treated Sarah Palin. We're staying home in November. Ed says that ain't happening with the Democrats, even with Nana Rich. Is he correct on that? Are the Democrats not staying home? And I'm just saying, Nana Rich's people have every right to itch and complain because they've not gotten any traction. Charlie Crist won't debate her, which means in some avenues, if this was a Republican, he would be classified as a sexist. So the bottom line is what Ed's saying. Kevin, do you agree? Democrats are not staying home in November. Last year, you remember, Kevin Derby, it was supposed to be the summer of Charlie Crist. Some of the liberal reporters have reported this year. Where was the summer of Charlie Crist this year? Where was it? You know, Ed Lynch, everybody's talking about independent voters. You know, we've been talking about on my radio show that when you look at the latest poll numbers, they've gone back and forth. And, you know, some people believe that Charlie could win it if the election was held today. Some say no, it'd be Rick Scott barely. But the libertarian here, I mean, no one's been talking about Adrian Wiley here, Ed Lynch. Some polls, Adrian points out 9%. Some polls, it's 4 to 5%. But the polls that Kevin and I have talked about during my weekly, or excuse me, my daily radio show during the week, is that he's taken more numbers away from Charlie. Right. Kevin, real quick, we got in this segment about a minute and a half. Ed Lynch points out about the Democrats and percentage and things like that, and Republicans. Give me a real quick a soundbite. How many Republican percentage-wise could Charlie Crist, you think, pick off in November? Okay, 25, rally 15%. Ed Lynch, what do you say? What is Charlie Crist getting off the Republicans in the November general election? Give me a percentage, 10, 15? 10 or 15%? Okay, real quick, does Rick Scott pull any Democrat votes? I say no. All right, about 5%. Kevin Derby, how many percent does he pull off? Wow, that's a lot for Governor Rick Scott. Coming up next here on the Ed Dean Radio Show, Marco Rubio. Is he the man in Florida that's going to get people elected? I'll explain more in a few moments right here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. on the Wednesday shows because of until I get all the. If we can keep around 2.5 minutes to breaks, that's all I'm saying on this. That's okay. All right, syndicated all throughout the state. We are the number one rated talk show anywhere in the state of Florida. It is the Ed Dean Radio Show. The email address is Ed Dean. That's D-E-A-N, not D-E-E-N. We don't spell it wrong. We spell it right. eddeanradio@gmail.com. eddeanradio@gmail.com. The website, eddeanradio.com. Here in the first hour of the Ed Dean Radio Show from the SunshineStateNews.com, a very popular news publication out of Tallahassee, is the senior political writer Kevin Derby, and also who is another good friend out besides Kevin, my good friend, political commentator. You see him on Fox News, Ed Lynch. So, Ed, I've seen these informal letters being signed by Marco Rubio for many of these incumbent senators that are in the state of Florida. I guess many of these guys are worried that there's going to be some sort of an Eric Cantor effect maybe coming up this Tuesday, that somehow some of these incumbents may lose in the Republican primary. I see these informal letters. You know, you can tell, I mean, your buddies with Marco. You can tell it wasn't hand signed. It was just, okay, his name was stamped on it. There we go. Is Marco Rubio the most popular Republican in the state when it comes to Republican endorsement in a Republican primary? So wait a second. You thought that Rubio's immigration bill that he was supporting was worth a shot? Yeah, yeah. All right. Let me go to Kevin Derby. Kevin, I mean, if I was going to send out a letter, it would be from, I mean, Governor Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio. Rubio's immigration bill, I wasn't a big fan of. Too many loopholes. Jeb Bush, I think, was a great governor, but he's been very adamant. I think his views go to a little bit more to the center than that of Rubio when it comes to immigration, also his support of Common Core. So who becomes the most popular individual? Marco, Jeb, who else are we missing? Does Marco outdo Jeb when it comes to all these endorsements? Right. Kevin, you know where I'm leading this up to. This is what I'm getting at. I don't see one in. I'm not saying the governor's going to come out and endorse, but I don't see in the Republican primary right now. I'll get to the Democrats in a few moments. I don't see any Republicans bragging about or talking about the Rick Scott agenda in the Republican primary. Do you? Because I don't see it. Now, hold on real quick before I go back to Ed Lynch. Kevin, do you see this translating into the November general election, or even when some of these guys may get some big numbers, but in these close races, you don't see Republicans hanging out having photo ops with Rick Scott at the general election, do you? Now, Ed Lynch, let me flip the script here, as we say on the Democratic side. If you're in a closely watched race between a Republican and Democrat, state house or Congress, do you bring in Charlie Crist as a photo op? Right, I know. Yeah. Ha. All right, Ed. Let me throw a curveball at you, Ed. You're running in a closely watched, tight race between the Republicans and Democrats. Who would you rather have your picture with, Charlie Crist or Barack Obama, for the general election? Ah, you got to pick, Ed? Yeah. So which one would be the least one of your favorites? I mean, Barack or Charlie, right? All right. Kevin Derby, what do you think? Give me the analysis. If you're running in a general election, who is the least likely person? I mean, you got to choose between the two that you don't want on your campaign material. Is it Barack Obama or Charlie Crist? Right. But we all know that the best photo op would be with their king, which is Bill Clinton, and rightfully so. I understand that probably. All right. When we come back from the break here on the Ed Dean Radio Show, we are now running into an issue that is not new, but I don't hear a lot, and that's about government efficiency. I mean, the Republicans are out there talking about cutting taxes after they raised them with Charlie Crist, but now we're in a spending mode. Who can outspend each other on education? Who can outspend each other on kids bright scholarships out there? Who can outspend on those in the environment? Where's the argument about saving taxpayers' dollars? We'll debate this in the upcoming hour right here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. Oh, okay, cool. Got some music to listen to. All right, hour number one of the Ed Dean Radio Show, heard all throughout the state, the number one radio talk show anywhere in the state of Florida, broadcasting all through these radio stations, also through the Florida Radio Network. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com is the email address, also the website, eddeanradio.com. Hour number one, Kevin Derby, senior political writer for the Sunshine State News, also Ed Lynch, political commentator, also seen him on Fox News. Here we go again, Ed. I mean, I want to see a contrast between the two parties, and now Charlie Crist is, and I've seen this a lot, Democrats do this to Republicans all the time. Instead of Republicans, which would be their normality, to talk about less spending and be more efficient and everything else, here we see them who can outspend each other. We're getting this big complaint fest of who can spend more money on the Indian River Lagoon and on the waterways and on the environment here in Florida. We're getting to this argument again here, Ed Lynch, about who can spend more money on education. Is this a trap for Rick Scott? Can you imagine, if, and I can see this happening here, Kevin Derby, where we're going to play role reversal, where you actually have, see, Rick Scott trying to act like a moderate here, to sit back and say, I've spent millions on the environment, I've spent millions on education, and then you can see Charlie Crist, who will have a valid argument to sit back and say, hey, well, wait a second, I'm for the minimum wage hike, I'm for spending here, but remember, when I was governor, we had a $66 billion budget. Now, Kevin, it's at what, $76 billion budget. Let me tell you something. That's going to resonate with a lot of voters when Charlie says that. Right. I thought you should stand for, well, they say green zone parties from the liberal left out there. Ed, Rick Scott tried to, and it's really interesting because we've covered this on the radio show for the last couple of years. Rick Scott, and I don't know who's running, well, I mean, I do, but I mean, many people are asking, who's running these campaigns? Is it Rick Scott or is it the handlers? Remember, Rick Scott was out there bragging about spending all this money in education, trying to buy out the teachers union. And remember last summer, head of the teachers unions, the PR person said, listen, they asked about, well, what about this extra, a few $100s into maybe a couple thousand over the long term of extra money that will go into the teachers' coffers that'll be money into their back pockets. And the teachers union spokesperson said, hey, don't think he's buying our vote. He's not getting our vote no matter what. I mean, do we not see these? I mean, they didn't vote for you last time, Governor. They're not going to vote for you this time. Rick Scott thinks he can maybe gain some votes here. I don't see it happening, especially among the teachers union. Right. That's right. All right, Kevin, here's an interesting point. Rick Scott didn't really have a bad session. He got pretty much what he wanted. Wasn't any bad publicity, and yet he was down by 8, 10 points, maybe a little bit more when you look at some polls. Spent millions upon millions of dollars. Now, in some polls, he's floating around 1 or 2 points above Charlie. Some have him down 1 to 2 points below Charlie. Uh, does it go any higher? Or is this pretty much what we're going to look at for the next few months here? It's going to be 43, 44, Adrian Wiley, anywhere from 5 to 9 points. Nobody's number is going to go any higher than 45% as of now. Is that what we're looking at till November? Ed Lynch, here on the Ed Dean Radio Show, a political commentator, also seen on Fox News. Kevin Derby, also in this first hour, senior political writer from the Sunshine State News, here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. You know, Ed, there's this old blame game after the election, and it happens on both sides. Oh man, Ed, we lost because we were outspent 2, 3, 4 to 1. Well, let me tell you something right now. That if this was the conventional wisdom, Rick Scott has been outspending Charlie Crist 2 to 1 over the last several months here, from the session on now to in the middle of August. This is what I'm getting at. Should not technically, I mean, I think because of the way that the economy's turned around, you would think, and I would think technically, Rick Scott should be up by 5 to 8 points, but he's not. With all the money being spent just on that issue alone, you would think Rick Scott should be up by 5 to 8 points, Ed. Kevin, I mean, let me bring Kevin back in the conversation. Kevin, you know that Rick Scott's not going to be able to win the debate. In fact, most Republicans will never win the debate against Democrats on the education side when it comes to spending, at least. Where does Rick Scott counterbalance or counterpart? Well, I guess I want to use this counter. Let me just use that regular word. How does he make the issue bounce off of him and put it back on Charlie on the issue of education? Does it come by that you sit back and say, well, Charlie Crist, to all you union people out there, flip-flopped on education. He supported Governor Bush's A-plus accountability program, which had accountability coupled and married together with school choice, which the unions didn't like. Charlie Crist has flip-flopped on school choice. Charlie Crist has flip-flopped on charter schools. Is that how Rick Scott counters back the argument when Charlie attacks him on education? Yeah. Every congressman sucks. Just don't bother mine mentality. Yeah, do you know why they're effective, Kevin? Because Rick Scott's not in them. That's why they're effective. Well, Ed, I'm telling you, I mean, if these guys are going to go back and forth, and you know in these debates of how many they may have, and I think the first debate will be fun to watch. I think the rest will put everybody to sleep here. I think that if the governor is smart, I'm not trying to push him over the edge or give him advice here. I think if the governor is smart, you don't sit here and try to battle the ideas of who can spend more money. I think the governor's going to fall into that trap. I think that if the governor's smart, he'll point out where Charlie's flip flop on the education area and why are people like the teachers union getting in bed with this political crossdresser, this opportunist. Go ahead, Ed. All right. Let me break down these poll numbers. We come back from the break with Ed Lynch and Kevin Derby. The ages of broken down 15 over love Rick Scott. What about those of the younger? Let's break these numbers down in the governor's race. Hour number one. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show. See, when people come on the afternoon show, it's just like, I'm just throw money at you. Guys, come on the morning show. Can I come on 7 o'clock? I'm going to get your fucking money. So I have to bribe some of my brothers. No. It's just because I keep telling guys this because see, they would rather have you do a cake show on a Wednesday. I'm like, guys, no. Joey's busy. I'm not going to bother her. I don't want to have to do. I mean, my time's very valuable on day, and I said we'll just do it before that Wednesday morning. Guys, come on. Or all these agents want me to come in live because they love the crowd.
Of course they love this house. Got about a minute and 30 seconds. Don't forget, we have to be out at 58:50. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go because they're taking off. I'll tell you guys start the night show like September, that Monday, because the new producer, I mean, no offense, all these guys are going to break it down and email and all that. I'll just have to do that with those guys. I might take a chance, no offense. Okay. But it's Fritz Kramer. He's supposed to be here at 7 a.m. And by the way, if Red comes in, please don't say this, but make sure he's not interrupted before we call the other show. He pulled that stuff last week. I didn't. Jay's here, but I didn't unlock the door, so I mean, you can get it whenever you want. And just keep them out there. syndicated all throughout the state. The fastest 2 hours, and I'm proving it, the fastest 2 hours anywhere in Florida Talk Radio. It is the Ed Dean Radio Show, eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. If you want to watch us live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com. This hour is, of course, brought to you by the Southeastern Legal Foundation. If you want to find out what's going on, the overextension of the EPA, people stopping them, also helping those stopping Obamacare and the nonsense that's going on there in the U.S. Supreme Court, they're one of the most popular groups out there, and we're glad to have them. Southeastern Legal Foundation, the website at southeasternlegal.org, southeasternlegal.org. Kevin Derby from the Sunshine State News, one of the best news publications in the state. He's their senior political writer and one of the best political commentators anywhere on radio. My good buddy, you've seen him on Fox News, Ed Lynch. Kevin, let me go with you. You and I thrive every day on my radio show. We talk about this, about the poll numbers. Does this kind of mirror what happened with Barack Obama? Remember, Mitt Romney got those 50 over. Barack Obama did a successful job maintaining those younger and also the young people to come out and vote for him again. Do the numbers, again, as I said, show that he's up over Charlie by almost 8 points? Where do these numbers break down? Go ahead, Kevin. All right, Ed, are you with me? All right, Ed, I'll ask you. I don't know what happened to Kevin. Ed, I'll ask you. Break some of these numbers down. Is this mirror with the Obama playbook that we saw? Young people coming out voting for the Democrats. Maybe it's not voting for Charlie. Maybe it's the marijuana debate. Kevin Derby, you back with me? All right, Kevin. Young people, marijuana. I don't know. The reason why I bring this up is we know many people don't realize this, that the majority of people that signed these petitions were not young people, but those of 50 and over, maybe even 55, that signed the marijuana petition out there. Does Rick Scott? If that's the case, he's winning 50 and over here. So I don't get these numbers here. Does Rick Scott win the 50 and over crowd, and does Charlie pick up the younger crowd? But Ed, you understand those numbers are kind of weird in a way. The majority, voters 50 and over support Rick Scott, but the majority of voters that signed the marijuana petitions were that of 50 and over. Can you imagine they're all smoking the night before the election and they all failed to get on vote and they all slept in and realized that Rick Scott became governor and medical marijuana didn't pass? Hey, you know what? You want to know something here, Kevin Derby, to sound facetious, but if you're wanted to push the marijuana initiative among young people, and again, remember, and break this down again, young people did not sign the petitions as much as the older people. Hey, maybe if you need to get the older people that support Rick Scott that passed medical marijuana, hey, bring out Cheech and Chong. They're in their 60s and 70s right now. So Kevin, real quick, a couple minutes left. So basically what you're saying is you could see, not as of today, I think Charlie Crist would probably win today, but in November, it is possible Rick Scott could win the governorship and medical marijuana pass. How about an oxymoron on that, huh? Ed, you see that scenario playing out that way? About the, it was about medical marijuana passing and Rick Scott being reelected. I agree. Okay. Ed Lynch, thanks for coming on today, and Kevin Derby, senior political writer from the Sunshine State News. Thank you to you two for coming on. I always appreciate it. All right, coming up in the next hour, political commentators Jay Kramer, also political editor for the. I didn't hear my music, that's why I was asking to go out. Anyways, the political editor for Space Coast Daily, Matt O'Hearn. Does marijuana really get to 60%, or is it a chance it may only get 58, 59%, which means it won't pass? Is it a possibility? We'll debate this in the next hour. EdDeanRadio.com. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, just play that. You can play it for a minute. That way I'll have the music on. All right, Jay, let's go. I got you and Matt O'Hearn. Get air. Double con. Boom, boom, boom. No, that's right. I gotta have the one. Yeah, what's the place to do this? Is it around here? Yeah. Where? It's down here on one. Jody, what? Okay, go ahead, get in. Hey, what? Ed says he could not hear Jeff. Yeah. Well, you don't have to. It sucks to get one of these. We're both on the same board. Okay, well, something you may have to do. Yeah, but what you may have to do is, as you know, when one goes down without something, you may have to tie one down and tie one up. You do it that way. Now, with Matt coming in, or Matt calling in, you can worry about that. Yeah. But if you got somebody, if you know, I won't allow you to talk to each other, so you can just do like the other you want. That's all. Yeah, Country Kitchen. That's north of here, Country Kitchen. And then what's the other one? The Roadhouse Grill or something? I'm gonna have to have some oatmeal. Yeah.
Really?
What mic should he use? Should we have really spot him up again?
We don't need to.
In the middle? Okay. Hey, Jay, sit in the middle, will you?
All right.
I know you're used to doing that anyways. And yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, keep it like this.
Yeah, and don't breathe into the mic. I know.
Oh, brother. Thanks for see. This goes in all the AM and FM stations on the weekend. All the big clear. See all the Rush Limbaugh stations carrying my show. Glenn Beck, Hannity, Dave Ramsey. So you're going to be. Look, that's a good fundraising tool. People know who you are. So what I'm getting at is that hold on. So a lot of the stations on the weekend, AM and FM stations, and some of them also carry into Georgia and South Carolina. So when I was negotiating with these stations, didn't have okay, fine, that's what I want. So they believe in my contract. Well, heck, I mean, it's a revenue situation, dude. I don't want them freaking do my own stuff. I don't want them controlling all my. Well, we negotiate back and forth. I said I want it for this price. I also want to return. Blah blah blah.
I like your shirt.
You like the shirt?
It reminds me of the shirt with Happy Gilmore.
I love Happy Gilmore.
Guns don't kill people. I do.
That's right. Hey guys, remember with who was the guy from Addams Family? Lurch. Remember Lurch was in the movie? He goes, "Well, I'm glad you can count." He goes, "And you can count on me, shooter, waiting for you out in the park." And I love that movie, man. I mean, as bad as all his movies was, that was a good bad movie.
It was a classic. The price is wrong, Bob.
Hey, has Matterhorn called in yet?
I'm gonna get the crap beaten out of him by Bob Barker.
The price is wrong, bitch. This kind of crap pisses me off.
But he's not available?
Yeah, he has to call in.
Oh, turn down.
Dude, come on, you're supposed to call in. Call in right now, but be awake too. Drink some coffee. Put your heads back. All right, bye. I'm going to knock him off at 7:45. Hey, Jody, I may take a break at 7:45 because I have Mike signing coming on. So I'll end Matt, and then have Mike on.
I'll just go easy on you in the first part because I said I get coffee with me.
No, don't say that.
Medical marijuana, huh?
Well, whatever. Medical marijuana. How come we don't talk about the good old issues like tort reform and stuff like that?
Well, Charlie Chris is going to have got that one locked up with Morgan and Morgan. Because Morgan and Morgan's out growing marijuana behind their places. They're gearing up for this.
High-speed rail. That was a bad article. Script News Service seems to do a decent job. They seem to do an okay job covering some stories. Script News.
Yeah, they ignored.
There's a difference of covering and reporting. So how many bring that there? That's good. Is it vice mayor or just councilman?
Vice mayor now.
What are you now?
Vice mayor. You mean pick a title, what do you want?
All right, second hour of the Ed Dean Radio Show. I'm just me. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of an echo. There we go. It's all on me. Are we sounding okay, Jody? I'm Captain Kirk here. Hey, I have to give it all she's got. You know, I never was a Star Trek fan, by the way. The movies, yes. I never liked the series. Just boring. Anyways, it is the Ed Dean Radio Show as we broadcast it all throughout the state. Thank you so much for tuning in. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. If you want to watch us live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. This part of the hour is being brought to you by the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. If you want to know what's going up in Washington, D.C., forget the partisan labels, but a good conservative group out there. The website is protectingtaxpayers.org, protectingtaxpayers.org. Hour number 2, sitting in the studios with me, Jay Kramer, political commentator here in the state, is also the vice mayor in the city of Vero Beach. For some of you going, where in the world is that are picking up this show in other parts of the state? It's East Central. Hey, better than South Central. Go figure that one. And my good friend, Matt O'Hearn. Matt, are you with me, bro? All right, Matt O'Hearn, he's part of our journalist panel today. He is the political editor for the SpaceCoastDaily.com. Space Coast, of course, there where the shuttle goes up. So he's going to hang out with us for a good part of the first hour here. Man, let me go to you. Let's talk about the media in this state. And the media in this state is not really much different than some of the liberal media we see. But you being, and I myself being all news reporters here, the one thing that I've said about newspaper coverage, and let's talk about the Palm Beach Post, let's talk about the Orlando Sentinel, the papers in Jacksonville, the papers in Tallahassee. I think that the editorial boards and a lot of these publications, and I'm not just picking on one, man, we all know that they're liberal. I mean, come on, we expect that, all right? I mean, when people say that, hey, Matt, I was, what's the word? I was offended, appalled, excuse me, let me use that word. I was appalled at the editorial board threw a certain Republican congressman under the bus. And yet, you know what I say in return, Matt? I'm appalled that you're appalled. It's the liberal editorial boards. Why should we be shocked about this? I don't see things changing, do you? Jay Kramer, besides getting your news from the Charlie Crist Times, where else? Where do I mean, we read publications. I mean, many people read the obituaries first. I think they want a little laughter, maybe some humor that people they didn't like are no longer around with us here. But having said all this, when you look at publications, I mean, as I tell, like for example, on conservatives, all right, let's play partisan politics here for a second. Hey guys, stop trying to be the best friends with the editorial board page here. They didn't vote for you last time. They're not endorsing for you this time.
Well, that's true. And getting in politics, you got to make sure that you know which bent each publication's got. You know, being best friends with the editorial board is not necessarily about really being friends, but really doing damage control. You know, I mean, you're never going to get on.
That's a good one. Explain that, the damage control.
Well, like I say, you know, you're never going to be on their good side.
Right.
You're always going to have something. You know, the dirty laundry is going to always come. But you know, what you really don't want is that zeal that they're just going to go after.
Okay, let me ask you this. You do a lot of political commentary, Jay. Let me start with you before I get back to Matt. I have said, as a, you know, my background, of course, has been the world of finances and also as a financial reporter and a political reporter. I have sat back and said that for the last several years, now there's a difference. Papers have done a better job covering stories. And you know me, I cover politics. They've done a better job covering, but when it comes to reporting, Jay, it's two different worlds. Have they done a better job on reporting the news stories? Covering is one thing, but reporting it accurately. You laugh. That must be a no. Yeah.
Reporters get very touchy about what they do. When you're in politics, you're always nagging them because they're not ever covering what you really want them to cover. But a lot of times, they'll report on what they want to report, and what they cover, what they go in depth with, and invest their time and money in, is just typically stories that match their philosophy or mantra of the paper.
Here in the studios, here on the Ed Dean Radio Show, political commentator, also the vice mayor of the city of Vero Beach, Jay Kramer, and then my good buddy, political editor for the SpaceCoastDaily.com, Matt O'Hearn. Matt, you said something here which is very interesting, and you see this as a kind of not a trend, but as a dividing line among the news publications in this country. I think you're starting to see them here in Florida. For example, most of the editorial boards, newsprint as far as publications, are very liberal. A lot of the blogs, for example, your all site, a very, very popular site here in the state of Florida, is a .com, is a digital. Is that what's also happening here in Florida, that most of the conservative publications are online compared to those on print? All right. Right. Well, Matt, Matt, let me interrupt you real quick. I mean, this is what I'm getting at. I mean, when we hear these from conservative talk radio hosts, people on my side of the aisle that sit back and say, okay, wait a second. The reason why that readership, I mean, it's weird. They go after the media two ways. They blame the liberal media for the loss of a Republican, and I don't like going down that road because sometimes the loss of a Republican is because of the Republican. The media's always been this way for 30 years. Having said that, Matt, one of the reasons why that the readership among newsprint have gone down, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, is not because everybody's ticked off about the left-wing media. It's because the people are reading their news online, digital-wise. Hence my comment here, Jay Kramer. They done a better job covering the story, but when it comes to reporting, it's a totally different world out there. To me, when I have to deal with the media, I give them a straight answer. I don't give them any more so they can't sit here and bend anything. And I will tell you this right now: as much as conservatives love to complain about the liberal press, Jay, those on the liberal ideologies, those that run for office, they blame conservative talk radio, and they blame Fox News. They blame the right-wing media out there for their loss.
Well, I guess we're doing something right then. We'd like to take all that kind of blame that we can and get as many of our conservatives into office. But I think the shift what you're saying here is that a traditional newspaper, traditional media,
right.
They go through a whole filtering process, an editorial board, but by the time the reporter gets a story submitted, and by the time it gets to press, it's been watered down, it's been changed. You've got this new.
The time it gets to the press, it gets depressed.
Okay, I'll go with that. But you got this blogosphere out there, and you got the digital media, and all of a sudden the reporters have so much more freedom. They can post more often. They
right.
write what's there. and you get your information so much more. I guess you can't say it any other way. It's a raw report.
You know,
and it's good.
You know, Matt O'Hearn, you and I both in the political world as we cover news stories. It's amazing because I've worked for some conservative publications. I've also worked for some conservative publishers out there. But when I was being interviewed, it wasn't asked. So, I mean, I wonder what some of these interviews go through. Are you pro-choice? You pro-gay marriage? You pro-marijuana? Mine was my publisher 20 years ago used to sit back and say, dude, that's what he used to say. You know how to cover a story. I'll do the editing. You cover the story. I think that maybe Jay's right that we have too much editorializing in some of these reporting stories we see here, Matt O'Hearn. Well, yeah. Well, wait a second. That means the whole paper's an editorial page, then, is what you're telling me, Matt O'Hearn. All right. Ten seconds. Come on. Or a bunch of libs. I totally agree. All right. When we come back from the break, how is the media going to cover the marijuana debate here in this state? That's what I want to talk about next. Jay Kramer, Matt O'Hearn from the Space Coast Daily. This is hour number 2 of the Ed Dean Radio Show. Hey, Jody, in the headset, it sounds like... Is it put on the box okay? Is it just my headsets, maybe?
No, because it's in my headset, but I don't know. Brett sometimes just has to mess with things that he shouldn't be messing with.
No, it only happens when you turn on the mic.
Yeah, I know, but I get what it sounds like, but
Yeah, there may be one of these where you may have to Jay's mic, my mic at a different time or something like that. You know, for example, you may have to do this, Jody. It's like when I'm talking, you find out Jay's mic, and you know I'm gonna go to Jay next because I say Jay Kramer. That means when I'm done, you need to pause this mic back. Maybe during the week, I don't know. That's all I'm saying. You may have to do, like I said, when I'm talking. Yeah, but like I said, when you know I'm going to go to Jay, I'm going to do Jay's thing first. Say, hey, Jay, and then when I'm done, pause mine down, or just slide his up, and I'll step away from mine. Because his sounds fine. Yeah, I know. Too funny. So you actually get up in the morning, work with third shift? Is that what? Just to make sure they're
make sure they're there, make sure they're doing what they're doing. Usually got special projects you got to put them on.
You know, people kind of like have an assistant to do that kind of stuff. Are you like me? Are you like a Virgo? You're anal perfectionist. You don't trust anybody else to do it right.
You got to make sure they're doing what they're doing.
No, that's why I'm asking.
You're paying them money. You need to make sure they're doing what they're doing. My third shift guys are great. You got to think about people.
Think about little oatmeal. Think about little grits. I'm gonna let this song play out. Flock of seagulls, baby. Ooh.
I remember this.
Minutes after the top of the hour, the Ed Dean Radio Show, the #1 radio show anywhere in the state. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Ed Dean, that's D-E-A-N, not D-E-E-N. We spelled it right. eddeanradio@gmail.com. eddeanradio@gmail.com. Want to watch me live on the air of the radio show? Watch us online at eddeanradio.com. Twitter is at eddeanradio. Facebook.com/eddeanradio, or look for Ed Dean. The political commentator and Vice Mayor of Vero Beach here in the studios with us. Jay Kramer also on our phone lines, my good friend, political editor for the SpaceCoastDaily.com, Matt O'Hearn. Jay, this marijuana debate is hype. It's hip to young people. Media coverage of this is going to be very interesting. Does the media cover this as though, hey, marijuana is good for glaucoma? Okay, listen, let me play devil's advocate. In some cases, maybe I'm true. It's good for glaucoma. It's good for Alzheimer's. Good for those with AIDS. Good for those with epilepsy, good for those with cancer. But how is the media going to portray this in favor as though it helps out those victims in times of needs? Or is it, Jay Kramer, maybe another issue? It's the sign of the times.
Well,
how about that one?
I think you're right about the sign of the times. You know, in a previous show you pointed out that, you know, the governor had signed in some legislation that supported medical marijuana. So really, what's this issue all about? You know, the medical side of it has already been allowed. And so, you know, one can't help but wonder, you know, is this the recreational side of the issue disguised as medical marijuana?
You know, you're exactly right. You know, Matt O'Hearn, you know, we pointed out on this radio show that the majority of people that signed the petition, were 50 and over. By the way, those people, according to the latest numbers out there and the poll numbers as of the last month, Rick Scott wins the 50-plus over crowd by almost 8-9 points over Charlie Crist, Matt O'Hearn. Jay Kramer, I think, is exactly right. The newspapers may cover this as a sign of the times. Matt, what do you see? Is it a sign of the times, or do newspapers promote this as saying, hey, it's we're a very socialistic, socially liberal environment today. This is part of it, like the gay rights movement and everything else. Or do they promote the goodness of what marijuana can be for those out there that have terminal illness? Matt, how's the media approach this story? John Morgan, big Democrat. That's right. You know, but this is an interesting iron. That's right. And by the way, Charlie Crist, who went to go work for Morgan & Morgan after he lost the Senate and then he stepped down from the governor. By the way, Matt, you ever think Charlie Crist has seen a day in court in the last 4 years? I don't think so. That's right. All right, so now let's get to the story here, Jay Kramer, and we'll get some other stories here on the hour number 2 of the Ed Dean Radio Show. The marijuana debate, and this is the irony of it. We are led to believe that young people will come out and vote for it because they all came out again and put Barack Obama, primarily here in Florida, put him back in for re-election mode. They came out and but extra higher, 2 to 3%. They came back out and voted for Barack Obama. The playbook that we've been told that the Democrats have of the very successful Obama campaign in all these states and also in Florida is to get young people and minorities out there to the vote. Let me talk about the minorities here in a second. Jay, let me start with you. Young people, again, the majority of people that signed these petitions were 50 and over, and yet we're going to try to portray this as something that young people want to implement. Very strange here. You get the young people out there, I think it can pass. My question is who do they sell this to? To the older generation or to the young crowd out there?
I think they're selling it to both. I mean, obviously, that the younger generation may be more impressionable to come out and vote on that. But on the other hand, you got to look at the generation of mature populace out there. I mean, they grew up in the 60s.
Right.
I mean, that was the first age of television, when Star Trek was prime time. And, that was when all of a sudden things started changing. This is a generation where they might say, you know what, this is okay. We're a little bit more liberal this time around. So, in the Vietnam era, that's when all this stuff started to happen. I think that the older crowd might start going for this type of thing.
Is it possible, Matt O'Hearn, you guys you see a lot of polls as you report a lot of the news here in Florida. Is it possible that everybody smokes a joint the night before, gets the munchies, falls asleep, doesn't vote, I know it's hypothetical thinking here, on Tuesday in November, now follow me here, because everybody's talking about, 75% of the Republicans support legalization of marijuana, independents it's 88, you throw the libertarians in with those, Democrats it's 80+%. Is it one of these, Matt, because you remember that Mitt Romney was going to win Florida by 5 points, he lost by, 1 point or 2 points. Well, on the flip side of this, that everybody thinks that marijuana is going to pass. The average voter may come out and say, you know what, I'm not going to vote. It's rainy. This thing will pass. They don't need my vote. Matt, is it possible that it may not get 60%, but it may get 58, 59? What do you think, Matt? Right. But Jay, remember, as you know, there are a lot of people that sign a petition, but it's kind of like these absentee ballots. Oh yeah, sign me up, Jay. Nobody really shows up to send in their absentee ballots lately. Do those people translate? They sign a petition. Do they translate to a vote for medical marijuana?
Well, I could tell you when you're out there polling, everybody wants to be your friend, and they'll give you what you want. But will they really vote that way? You really don't know.
I mean, what do you go? I mean, if you're Rick Scott or Charlie Christie, you walk out with a Mary Jane and an advertisement. I mean, is that what we do? Go ahead, Matt. Hey, listen, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'll tell you with about a minute left, a lot of voters, well, due respect, are not smart, i.e. look at some. So here's my thing. The primary is coming up Tuesday. I'm thinking some Democrats may show up because they may think medical marijuana is on Tuesday's ballot initiative here, Matt. 20 seconds. Go ahead. Well, I agree. Listen, the marijuana debate is not a partisan issue. Let's just be honest about that. Coming back from the break, what happened to all the sexy issues like tort reform and school choice and offshore drilling? We don't hear about it from the Republicans anymore. Why is that? Back in a few moments, hour number 2 of the Ed Dean Radio Show. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Back in a few moments. I love the song.
Yeah.
It's a good, clean song. Not that I don't mind the ghetto type here, but
this guy Wilson, who was his name, I think, sang a song. Died on stage with a heart attack in a performance.
Flip.
Yeah.
So
you get these sites and they have all this weird stuff. You just remember it.
So I had Stephen Meyer.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Excitement.
Yeah. That guy's a fountain of misinformation. Anyway, so Steve, I get a lot of emails from people. that try to outright wing you. So I had Castro, Jabin Castro from the Leadership Institute. Jabin's a good young conservative guy. Jabin, we were talking about the breakdowns of the reason why Romney lost. Romney lost because he did not, as a missionary, go into the other fields to...
Romney lost because he didn't connect.
That's exactly right. But remember, he didn't have an office. I mean, you got to do more than just show up at an NAACP dinner, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, you need to have an office there in all the minority committees, and Romney didn't have it. So anyways, some of the breakdown. So he sent me an email. Oh, good, here. And I was, that's Steve, nice guy. And so I got this from a few other people as well, and they're like, trying to like, instead of like, yeah, you're right. Where'd you get this, Steve? Where'd you get your numbers? And I was like,
no, wait, I'm sitting on them.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, your numbers about they don't add up because McCain. I think Romney, when he finally did the numbers, he probably got like less than a million votes more than McCain. Okay, but what I'm talking about is the breakdowns. The evangelical stayed home and all this other stuff. He goes, well, I don't know where you're getting your numbers. So I point out red state, and I said, and so he comes back again. He goes, the evangelicals percentage, for example, in Indiana were up, and blah blah blah. So I send him back and go, let me point this out. If you got 1,000 Christian voters, all right, now follow me. 1,000 Christian voters, but 10% only shows up. But in the next 4 years, you only have 200 evangelicals, but 40% shows up. Technically, did your percentage go up? Yeah. But I said, out of the 200, the 1,000, but only 200 showed up, they're crappy. They don't make sense. So I said, dude, maybe you need to get your numbers right. I said, mine are dead on. I put up a bunch. I said, those numbers come from Huckabee, and I'm like, guys, really? You trying to outright wing me here? Give me a freaking break. How much longer? How much longer we got? Okay, thank you, Joe. Because I'm happy. I mean, guys, I'm not here to have an itch fest. I mean,
so what are we coming back to talking to?
What happened to all the good sexy issues?
Good, all sexy issues.
TOR reform,
yeah.
Tax cuts.
This is a non-sexy election. This is a numbers election.
That's exactly right.
Who can get out the most?
That's exactly right. I'm the host with the most. My name's not Ted Yost. Oh, I can't stand the arts. What? Arts. All right, more at the Ed Dean Radio Show. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com. eddeanradio@gmail.com. You want to watch us live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Hanging out for a few more moments, my good friend, political editor for the Space Coast Daily, Matt O'Hearn, and then Jay Kramer, political commentator, also the vice mayor of Vero Beach. Jay, what has happened to all the sexy issues that we used to talk about? I mean, you and I and Matt were all still relatively very young here. I mean, I used to cover issues of tax breaks, school reform, school education, tort reform. Jay, what has happened to these issues? We know now the liberals are, hey, spend more money on education, spend more money on beach nourishment, spend more money on Medicaid, spend more money on the Medicaid expansion of Obamacare. It's the same old, same old. What has happened to the issues from the Republicans on these issues? Tort reform's never talked about anymore. Sexy issues are gone. I need to bring sexy back.
Well, I think during the break we kind of covered that. A lot of times when politicians go into a race, what they're going to do is they're going to take an attitude of what matters and what doesn't matter. Unfortunately,
that can be deadly for some. Yes,
there's a lot of truth to that, because what a politician wants is they want as many people from his side or her side coming out to vote for that person, and then dissuade as much as the other side coming out and voting for that. And unfortunately, the race that we've got coming up, we don't have these strong personalities that attract people, but rather,
it's a numbers game, as you said.
It's an absolute numbers game. We've got some candidates that probably repel in some circumstances more than they attract. So this is going to be a numbers game. The medical marijuana thing was a perfect example.
Right.
That attracts people to the polls. Hopefully, they're going to vote for the Democrats if they come for medical marijuana. They're not going to come out and vote for Chris.
Has, Matt O'Hearn from SpaceCoastDaily.com, has medical marijuana, I mean, we're all sitting back going, oh my word, Tuesday's the primary, maybe we'll take a break for a couple weeks and we'll gen up ready for the general election. Has medical marijuana gotten overused, overrated because other states are talking about it? I mean, if Florida's one of the few states and everybody's focus was on Florida, I mean, this is a semi-sexy issue, but is it getting overblown now because all the other states are talking about it as well? Yeah, that was sexy about 4 years ago. Right. But wait, Matt, hold on. You and I cover politics, and let me tell you something. Do you know who brings it up? Members in the Republican Party that are running against another member of the Republican Party inside a state House, state Senate, congressional primary. Oh, let's bring up the Arizona immigration bill. They did that 4 years ago. It absolutely went nowhere. Now what have Republicans given you? In-state tuition for those of you that are here illegally. Republicans bragged about offshore drilling, by the way, which the numbers have been told it could be anywhere from $1 to $3 billion into the state's coffers. And unfortunately, I know what the liberals are all about. They're kind of boring, but Republicans talk about these issues. And heck, let me throw another one out there at you, Matt. What about gambling? This is an issue that's going to come back up. This is an issue that needs to be addressed, and Republicans do not want to vote on it because, heaven forbid, we might run for a higher office, and the other Republican might attack us for voting in favor of this. I'm telling you something, Matt, some of the sexiest issues that should be talked about are not being talked about anymore. Right. Jay Kramer, he's exactly right. It's all about a timing issue. If the governor really wants to push a issue that will relate and connect with all voters out there, it's repealing the car registration tax increase that was passed by Charlie and the Republicans in 2009, which doubled everybody's car fees increases. Let me tell you something. That directly impacts people's back pocket. I think that's brag-worthy right there that might push Scott over the finish line.
Well, we hope so. And, the thing about politics is that you may have done something, but it doesn't count unless you can tell somebody.
That's exactly right.
And the governor's campaigning is not covering that just at the current moment. It might be something that he's waiting to do a little bit later on down the road, closer to the campaign, so that the other side doesn't have a chance to respond to it. But, when it hits people directly in the pocketbook, I think it does speak very loudly.
But, I mean, you look at the Republican primaries. I mean, the sexiness of tort reform. Everybody now, it's the same old that I've been hearing from the Republican side for the last 20 years. Less taxes, less government, more freedom. Hey, that's great. Can you break that down for me in I don't know, 4th, 5th grade elementary terms here? And those issues, like we talked about tort reform, school choice. Now, let's be honest, at least the Democrats, which I do not agree with, but I give credit where credit is due. The Democrats are at least consistent on this issue of spending more money. They don't have a plan here, Jay, but it's spend. The Republicans did very well with this issue when Charlie was even supporting Governor Bush's A+ accountability program in the 2000s. Republicans have dropped the ball on education reform and school choice.
I don't think they've dropped the ball on education.
They don't talk about it.
Well, they don't talk about it because they're not making it part of their campaign platform. But, I specifically remember Governor Scott pulled educational money and then turned around and gave it directly to the teachers. He basically cut out middle management and cut out the unions on education. And they are responding right now because Governor Scott had taken away, that layer of bureaucracy in the educational system that really did not engage our children and teach our children. Governor Scott did the right thing. He made sure that the money is spent where, the employee touches the children best in education. He really did focus the money spending right where the children needed it.
Matt O'Hearn, the previous hour, I said what we're going to run into was about who can outspend each other, and the Democrats are great at this. They pull the Republicans into their circle, and now it gets a bidding war. Who can spend more money on the environment? Who can spend more money on the education process? You now see Rick Scott out there. Hey, I've spent a boatload of. In fact, Charlie didn't spend enough. I'm the one who spent all this money on the environment in the Indian River Lagoon, the St. Johns River. And then you got Charlie Crist saying, no, you didn't. I spent more money. Matt O'Hearn, the issue of education. We spent more money here. No, we're going into this trap here of who can spend more money, and yet nobody talks about the issues of how to reform this, how to make government more efficient there, Matt. I think Republicans have dropped the ball, and if they go into this bidding war, I think they're going to lose. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Man, I've heard from those in the, for example, those of the 9/12 groups and the Patriots and the Tea Party groups, and I like a lot of these guys. At least they're honest and, different ways of maybe how to approach an issue. But I understand where they're coming from. I feel them. But when you talk about the issue of Common Core, I've had some of these groups out there that have sat back and said, "This is what's going to do it in for Rick Scott. He's not going to win because of this issue." I do not buy into that. No.
Mm-hmm.
You think so? All right, listen,
Yep.
Jay Kramer. Before I get to break here in a moment, radio station owners that carry my radio show, some of them are Democrats, but they're honest Democrats because they understand about the buck. They're here to make a dollar, and is that a problem? Some of you liberals out there, I'm making a profit here. Anyways, and I've had some of these station owners that carry the show I've met with and talked with, and we have a little one-on-one conversation. And let me tell you something. They've sat back and said, you know what? We think we're going to probably vote for Rick Scott. And I went, really? And these are pro-Obama guys. But they're going to probably vote for Rick Scott because they said the way the economy's turned around, and Charlie left it in the dump. All right, listen. Matt O'Hearn, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate it. I love you, brother. Matt O'Hearn from SpaceCoastDaily.com, SpaceCoastDaily.com. Coming up next, Jay Kramer's going to hang out with me from Fox News 35, my other good friend, political reporter. Oh, boy, Mike Sinan. All these counties now want to push, are you ready for this? School tax increases, not on property, but more on sales tax. Back in a few moments, this is the Ed Dean Radio Show. Yeah, these school sales. So I told.
Yeah, like we need more taxes. The function of taxes, it does stay abreast with inflation. And I hope people understand that.
And give me yesterday's paper, see if you'll see that.
You are bad. major thing how some people can be about raising taxes.
Well, I'm gonna let them raise my taxes, but I'll tell you what I want in return.
You do understand taxes are a percentage of your.
Hey, you got the number? You calling in now? Yeah, call that number. We're ready to go, bro. Thanks. What'd you say?
You understand that taxes are calculated as a percentage of income, not as a flat amount.
That's sales tax. Sales tax is based on what you spend, not on income. I mean, poor people have no income, but they spend money.
Taxes are a percentage of what they spend.
Well, on what they spend, I agree with you on that. You said what their income is.
Well, that's income tax.
True.
But taxes are calculated as a percentage, so they keep abreast of inflation. So when you increase taxes, you actually are.
Am I calling?
You're pulling more money out of people's pockets.
And this one I don't get. I'm for the fair tax, but all these liberals complain about it. I'm like, well, wait a second. When the teachers unions want to raise, the teachers union can raise a 5-cent sales tax, they do it. But they don't complain. Well, wait, we can support people. But when the teachers union do it, oh, we support the sales tax increase.
Milton Friedman's got a great book about that kind of stuff. I gotta reread that book again.
All right, more at the Ed Dean Radio Show, broadcasting all throughout the state. Thanks so much for tuning in. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Also, you can watch us live on the air at eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Jay Kramer, political commentator, Vice Mayor of Vero Beach, hanging out with me till the top of the hour. And I love having this guy on my radio show, and it's good to have him on today. Well-known Fox News political reporter out of Fox News 35 out of Orlando, my good friend Mike Simon. Mike, as many people listen to the show throughout the state, one of the biggest issues that you and I have talked about on my daily show that many communities are doing, and I think people need to rely and focus on the news when it comes to these issues, is about how many in Central Florida, North Florida, and South Florida want to go back to the well again because there isn't enough money, and they want not to raise the property tax, they want to raise the sales tax for schools. Give us a lowdown on what's going on. So our indirectly, again, Mike Simon from Fox News 35 out of Orlando. So Mike, basically what you're telling me is the reason why we have to raise sales taxes is because of the amendment that was passed back in 2002, the classroom size amendment, which we have spent literally $18 to $19 billion worth, and now schools now have to comply with all this. There isn't enough money around from this unfunded mandate. Schools now have to pick up the tab. So where do we go? We raise taxes. Is that what you're saying? Ah. Mm. Mike, how are many of the school districts in the state of Florida, how are they selling this? Is it as you've known, because you're one of the best reporters out there, it's always a blame game. They blame Tallahassee for not spending the money proportionally, which is technically true. Then, of course, Tallahassee blames the local municipalities by saying you guys wasted money. Is the reason for the tax increase, is it turning into a blame game, or are officials saying, hey, the revenue has not come in because the economy has really not turned around? Oh, there we go.
Precisely. He can't be against it.
Oh my word, Jay Kramer. Let me bring Jay in the conversation with Mike Simon. Jay, I have sat back and said, and I talked about this with Mike on my daily radio show. I have sat back and said, and people think I am kind of being a little bit maybe disingenuous, but I will tell you this right now. Jay, you want to raise my sales tax for the schools, as Mike said, for the children by a quarter penny, a half a penny, or a full penny. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll support it, Jay. Then you just lower my school property tax by 15-20%. How about that as an offset there, Jay? I'd go for that.
That wouldn't happen.
Oh, I know it would happen, but that's how I'd sell it.
School boards have had their way for years, and they've kept collecting more money. And if you look at your tax statement, and it's the majority of it all goes to school. And your commentator was right. Once you say it's for the children, politically you don't touch it. You can't touch it. You can't be
Ed Gein Radio Show for the children.
You can't be against it.
Mike, I know that some Central Florida counties are they passing an offset in the property tax to promote the sales tax? What's going on there? Mike Simon from Fox News 35 here on the Ed Gein Radio Show. Also, Jay Kramer, Vice Mayor of Vero Beach, also political commentator. Mike, tell me about the breakdowns of these, because these are things that are going to come up in the general election in November. Now, there have been some special elections where the people have voted for them. But what I am what I am seeing here is that some of the new school sales tax, and you please break it down and tell me where I haven't focused on in which county or red states. This is what I'm getting at. The blue counties, predominantly Democrats, are notorious for every other few years. Hey, we got to raise the millage rate. We got to extend the local option gas tax. We got to raise the sales tax. But they've never been popular for years in red counties where Republicans control, as we say, the rural counties, redneck counties, whatever you want to call it. Am I wrong to sit back and say that I'm starting to see these tax increases in red counties that we wouldn't have seen maybe 5, 8, 10 years ago? Right? Wait, you hear what he just said, Jay? They're trying to extend it. Like, for example, we have these local option gas taxes. Gas prices, I don't care, they've gone down a little bit. By the way, all the turmoil in the Middle East, and we still have gasoline prices going down. Anyways, Jay, we've been told that if we just that local option gas tax, Jay, and 5 years down the road, we'll probably sunset it. We don't need it anymore. Jay, as Mike pointed out right now, that they're trying to extend it. I've never seen a tax spin. Now, excuse me, a property tax cut, yes, but a local option gas tax, a local sales tax, I've never seen them rescind it.
That's true. They haven't. I know here in Indian River County we've had bond issues that's come off. So I mean, we have reduced our school taxes here locally, just due to some financing issues. And maybe that's the way to do it. That if you've got a project, let's not put it onto a tax side of a sales tax or as a general tax on ad valorem, but let's do it as a finance project so that it's guaranteed to come off of that tax. The tax rolled into the future. That's really the way to do it.
Hey, Mike, real quick, with a couple minutes left, tell me about the groups that are supporting this sales tax increase. Do you see it from the Chamber of Commerce? Do you see it from pro-business groups out there?
That's true.
Wow. I mean, what I'm getting at, Jay, is
well,
pro-business. Hey, man, we're anti-tax, pro-business, and yet they're all coming behind supporting school sales tax.
it's surprised when you're supposed to have an RFP for all these processes. These are the guys that actually get the bids and actually get to do the work.
Hey, Mike, what do you think about that, huh? Wow. All right, Mike Sinan, who is one of my favorite, he's a dear, dear friend of mine, but one of my favorite guests. I try to get him on as much as I can on my daily show and weekend show. From Fox News 35 out of Orlando. My friend, thank you for making the time. As always, I am very much appreciated. Thank you, brother. And vote early and vote often. But I'm appreciative, but I appreciate them coming on. So, anyways, Jay Kramer, thank you for coming on this hour.
Absolutely.
I'd love having you come on. We're going to go get some chow now. Again, Ed Dean Radio Show, heard all throughout the state. Again, the email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Also, you can go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Jay Kramer, thanks again, current Vice Mayor of Vero Beach, political commentator. Thanks for coming on today. Any questions you have, again, email me at eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. We'll see you next time